Welcome to another edition of the Magic Latest Podcast where we discuss everything Orlando Magic basketball. I'm your host, Jalon Dixon, and today we've got a couple of things to get into. But before we get started, remember to like, comment, and subscribe for daily Orlando Magic content. We are on the road to 1,000 subscribers and trying to become one of the biggest Orlando Magic communities here on the YouTube space. With all that being said, remember to hit that post notification bell so you always know when we're dropping new videos. And let's go ahead and get right into today's episode, starting off with some more Jonathan Isaac pessimism. I have talked about this throughout the summer as we get closer to training camp that one of the most interesting players on our roster to watch when it comes to the trade block this upcoming season is Jonathan Isaac. Obviously, his contract itself of 4 years, $84 million is going to be one that makes him one of the more expensive players on the team as far as guys that are quote unquote expendable are concerned. Of course, our core four are set. They are the highest paid players on the team, but they are pretty much linchpinned to this roster. But a guy who does have a lot more questions around him when it comes to the idea of maybe being able to bolster this roster up without necessarily having to dig into some of our cheaper contracts has been and always will be, as far as I'm concerned, Jonathan Isaac. Orlando Magic Daily, shout out to them as we always do, wrote an article pretty much saying that the fate of Orlando Magic longtime veteran Jonathan Isaac is pretty much sealed. It seems as though the future of Isaac with the Orlando Magic is pretty much written in stone that this guy is going to mess around and not be on this team by the end of maybe not this upcoming season, but is soon to be on the trade block pretty aggressively and probably moved for some kind of financial flexibility. Particularly the section I want to focus on, because we've talked about the financials of Jonathan Isaac being moved before. I want to focus on their reasoning around the Orlando Magic's depth playing a part in why Jonathan Isaac may actually be an expendable player. It says Tristan da Silva showed the ability to be a guy who can handle the rock, move without the ball, be a capable shooter from the perimeter, and play within the flow of the game. If he takes another strong step forward into year two, that could affect Isaac's minutes and opportunities. Obviously, we've said a lot about Tristan da Silva throughout the summer with his time playing with Team Germany, as he's been a guy who's been able to be a movement shooter, a guy who's just been focusing on mainly being a defender next to Dennis Schroeder and Franz Wagner, and has been able to step into a real 3-and-D role. It continues to say Orlando also has to see if Jet Howard can turn into the shooter that they envision him to be going into year three. The Magic will have to continue to give minutes to guys like Anthony Black, Mo Wagner, and potentially Goga Batadze off the bench. The free agency additions of Desmond Bane and Tyus Jones will both be playing a lot of minutes night in and night out as well. And this is all without mentioning both of the Orlando Magic draft picks in Jace Richardson and Noah Pinda, who look like a potential who Noah Pinda particularly looks like a potential Jonathan Isaac replacement option if he continues to develop. All that to say, a lot of people have been worried about the Orlando Magic depth for quite some time. Now, it is slowly but surely become a strength. One where Jonathan Isaac actually could end up being on the bad end of it. Because I've said this before, I said this very early in the summer cycle, that I believe that Noah Pinda is the guy that we have to look at as the potential Jonathan Isaac replacement. 6'9", can handle the rock, high energy guy on offense and defense, a guy who I think can play really well next to Mo Wagner or Goga Batadze. I think could fit interestingly next to Wendell Carter Jr., who can stretch the floor. I think there's a real reality where Jonathan Isaac is positioned as a dude who, if he can't play more than 20 minutes a night, as the article actually later on mentions, you have to be able to make the most out of how expensive his contract is, given the fact that he's a guy that can only contribute to you in limited minutes, but is like the fifth or sixth highest paid player on your roster. Right? This is a guy who is an all-NBA caliber defender in his minutes that he plays, but he doesn't play enough minutes to actually be considered in the all-NBA defensive conversation. It's counterintuitive. Jonathan Isaac, unfortunately, that situation puts him in a real bad spot when you're talking about his future with the Orlando Magic, because now that this team is playing with a championship mentality, guys become more expendable because their contracts hinder the ability to have real flexibility moving forward. Also, particularly with this skill set, if you can only play 20 minutes, you're also, those are 20 minutes you're taking away from the development of other guys who could be serviceable for longer. Goga Batazde, Mo Wagner, Noah Pinda, Jace Richardson, right? So Jonathan Isaac almost is an innings eater to a certain degree. And I hate to disrespect him like that, given the fact that I know how elite of a defender he is. But he's almost an innings eater to a certain degree because of the fact that he can't play on the floor long enough to truly, truly be considered as a top flight impact player. He's a per minute impact player, but he's not a top flight impact player. And to be your top five, top six player in terms of salary and not be considered as a top flight talent usually is going to lead to your name being one of the top names on the trade block. So I'm not surprised at all that there is continued pessimism around Jonathan Isaac, his contract situation, and how he fits on this roster long term. Next up, I found a New York Knicks Sports Illustrated writer who actually shouted out the Orlando Magic as being the team that the New York Knicks need to truly be cautious of. And I'm not surprised by that, actually. But I'm going to read a passage that I thought was really important from said article that I think is telling about why exactly the Knicks should be concerned about the Orlando Magic. Starting with this, and it actually touches on a different team. The Pistons blossomed from a 14-win team in 2023-24 to the number 6 seed in the Eastern Conference playoffs, losing to the number 3 seed Knicks in a 6-game series. A lot of changes took place to help the Pistons get to that point, but only more will get better as the upcoming seasons approach. And one of those teams that got better were the Orlando Magic, who they point out as, with the addition of Desmond Bane being one of the bigger things that touches on. Let me actually scroll down to where it touches on it. Excuse me. All right, perfect. So the part that it says specifically is the Knicks shouldn't have to deal with the teams like the Indiana Pacers and Boston Celtics, both whom have injuries to the best player that will keep them out for the entire year. But other squads like the Orlando Magic could make their job a little harder. The Magic have one of the best young trios in the league with Paulo Banchero, Franz Wagner, and Jalen Suggs. All three of them missed considerable time last season, which is part of the reason why the Magic finished 41-41 with the number 7 seed in the Eastern Conference playoffs last season. The team has one of the best defensive units in the league, but has often been hampered by playmaking and three-point shooting on the offensive end, which is why they attempted to eradicate those issues by bringing in Memphis Grizzlies guard Desmond Bane, who shot over 38% from downtown, along with Tyus Jones, who is also expected to be the team's table setter off the bench. The Knicks had Orlando's number last season, winning 3 of the 4 meetings between them, including an NBA Cup game that clinched the group for New York at Madison Square Garden. This year, none of that matters. The Magic could be a completely different team on the court, with Bane contributing in the playmaking department with Banchero and Franz Wagner. Add in healthy Suggs and Mo Wagner, and the Magic become one of the biggest threats in the NBA. Hey, he said it, not me, right? It's typical for an Orlando Magic page or YouTube channel, such as this one, to talk about the strengths of what a team like the Orlando Magic bring to the table against some of these other squads. Obviously, the physicality, star power, addressing one of our biggest needs in the offseason being the three-point shooting. Looking at the New York Knicks, the article actually addresses that the Knicks need to become more efficient offensively and more intense defensively. It'll be interesting to see if Mike Brown can fix those things. This team is not the team that the New York Knicks faced last season. They're healthy as of right now. Knock on wood. They're healthy. They're together for another year in terms of their core team still being pretty much the same. They addressed one of their biggest issues. They addressed their biggest issue this summer bringing in three different guys who address the three-point shooting issue. If you talk about Tyus Jones, Desmond Bane, and Jace Richardson, you added to the depth by bringing in Noah Pinda. I like Tristan Da Silva and what he's slowly but surely developing based off of what we got from him at the back half of last year, or the beginning portion of last year, excuse me, and building on some of that with Team Germany this summer. Then you double down on that with the fact that this team, in a weakened Eastern Conference, sees that the window is open. The Knicks should acknowledge the Orlando Magic as a true threat because they are. And it's interesting to see Knicks writers giving the Magic their just due because a lot of people are slating the Magic as the third best team at best in the Eastern Conference. If you remember, we did the one power ranking where USA Today still had Orlando as the seventh team in the Eastern Conference. So while some are very high on Orlando, others are still very uncertain about what they can be with the stage being this big and the lights being this bright now, given now that they have real expectations. It's good to see that there's a healthy level of fear across the Eastern Conference of the Orlando Magic as a team on the rise that is going to be an absolute problem. Because they are. Because they are. Period, point blank. Next, let's talk about Bleacher Report. They graded every team's starting five going into training camp, with the Orlando Magic starting five being Jalen Suggs, Desmond Bane, Franz Wagner, Paulo Banchero, Wendell Carter. And they give him an A-, mainly pointing out on the fact that Wendell Carter is the one that necessarily is holding them back from being an A+. Wendell Carter needs to develop as a three-point shooter more consistently. He needs to develop as a more consistent three-point shooter, and he needs to improve as an all-around rim protector for this team. But you look at star power. Paolo Franz, all-star caliber. Desmond Bane, fringe all-star caliber player. Very much CJ McCollum-esque, right? Jalen Suggs, your Drew Holiday, all-NBA caliber defender. All you need is for Wendell Carter Jr. to step up. I've said this before, and I feel like I've said this very casually, but I really mean it. The Orlando Magic have quietly built their team in the mold similar to the Boston Celtics. The Boston Celtics have an MVP caliber player in Jason Tatum as their lead star at the wing position. Paulo Banchero, to me, I believe, is a guy who is going to be in the MVP conversation very, very soon. And has already solidified himself as an all-star. Jaylen Brown, although on a different tier than Franz Wagner in terms of his production and what he's been able to actually accomplish within the league so far, is a all-star caliber wing, secondary option, secondary shot creation next to Jason Tatum. That's what Franz Wagner is next to Paulo Banchero. All-NBA caliber defensive guard who can also shoot the three at a high level and make good decisions with the ball in his hands. That's what Drew Holiday was in the championship year with the Boston Celtics. Right? Desmond Bane is your tertiary ball handler, secondary initiator on the perimeter in terms of the backcourt, and a guy who can shoot the three ball at a high clip. Very similar to what Derek White developed into as he's grown in a Boston Celtics uniform, right? So let's go across the board. That also means their center, when it wasn't Kristaps Porzingis, it was the linchpin, Al Horford, who was Wendell Carter Jr. compared to, who was his draft comparison when he was brought in by the Chicago Bulls all those years ago? Al Horford. To be a high-level rim protector, smart IQ defensively, and a guy who had the ability to potentially stretch the floor and give you 4 to 5 three-point attempts from beyond the arc. That's the mold. The mold is the championship version of the Boston Celtics. And Wendell Carter Jr. is the only one who I think does not necessarily play all the way up to the level of those guys. I think Jalen Suggs is on par with Drew Holiday in terms of being an All NBA caliber defender. I think Desmond Bane is the same, if not a little bit better overall, as a shot creator, as a tertiary shot creator on the perimeter than Derek White. If not better, then he's definitely on par with him. Paulo Banchero, probably a tier below Jason Tatum, and I would say the same thing about Franz Wagner being probably about a tier below Jaylen Brown. But Wendell Carter Jr., he's obviously not significantly worse than Al Horford, but I think that he doesn't provide the same level of impact that Al Horford did for that team, despite the fact that they have very similar skill sets. Wendell Carter needs to be a player that has more impact on the game on a night-to-night basis. Doesn't need to be a box score demon, but he needs to truly be a threat as a stretch big. He needs to truly be a threat as a rim protector. He needs to truly be a threat as a secondary, a slide guy, where if we go to attack a closeout, we know that Wendell Carter Jr. is right there behind for the secondary contest to block the shot, right? Wendell Carter needs to be more intense and more active as a center and more consistent as a three-point shooter if he is going to fulfill the role that the Orlando Magic are slowly but surely carving out for him. This team is deserving of an A or an A plus starting five. The thing holding them back is Wendell Carter Jr., but I think he has the capability to step up and meet that role in the way that is most necessary for this team to take the leap that they're poised to make with everything they've done this summer. Last but not least, there was a series done by the Orlando Magic Daily, shout out to them, where they did two separate articles. An article on the formula for every NBA Eastern Conference contender to beat them Orlando Magic, and then every other tanking team's formula to beating the Orlando Magic. This is an 82 game cheat sheet, essentially, on how every team in the Eastern Conference, so really more like 40 to 41 games, give or take, how every team in the Eastern Conference can cause potential matchup issues for the Orlando Magic. And so I'm not going to go through every single team's quote-unquote upside against the Magic in one singular video. We're going to turn this into a bit of a mini-series. And we're going to start with the contending teams in the Eastern Conference and then work our way to the tanking teams in the Eastern Conference. And before you know it, we'll have discussed all 14 teams and their quote-unquote formula to be able to beat the Orlando Magic in any given game or any given series if, some of the tanking teams seem to burst onto the scene, so to speak. And we're going to start with the Cleveland Cavaliers. And they say that size is the formula that the Cleveland Cavaliers hold to making them the most dangerous team against the Orlando Magic. One of the biggest things they note, too, is in the playoff series a few years ago, Jared Allen was dealing with a rib injury he suffered in Game 3 that kept him out of the series, the back half of the series. And in that win in March in Cleveland, Evan Mobley was also out due to injury. The Cavs easily won the games 1 and 2 with Mobley and Allen together in the 2024 playoffs, although they had a minus 3.1 net rating in those 80 minutes. Mobley especially presents a difficult matchup because the Defensive Player of the Year is one of the few players big enough to and mobile enough to stymie both Paulo Banchero and Franz Wagner. Cleveland is a tough out for any team. They are among the favorites in the East, but even though the Magic have had success, they present a unique challenge. Fair. I also would say that although they were able to successfully hold off the Orlando Magic in games 1 and 2 with Jared Allen and Evan Mobley healthy, I would also say that this year, in comparison to 2 years ago, there is more floor spacing on the Orlando Magic than we had even remotely close to 2 seasons ago. Jalen Suggs had also entered that series very, very wonky himself and a little hobbled. But you're adding an all NBA caliber defender, hopefully healthy, that can shoot the three ball at a high clip. Also, yes, Evan Mobley and Jared Allen can combat the slashing ability and the foul drawing ability of guys like Franz Wagner and Paulo Banchero. But now you are in a situation where you have to also take into account Desmond Bane as a tertiary on ball creator, something that the Orlando Magic had not had in that series and have not had for the last 2 to 3 seasons. Despite the fact that Jalen Suggs is a very nice ball handler and good decision maker, he is not necessarily a trusted tertiary shot creator, right? Desmond Bane is a 20 point per game scorer with developed shot creation, a 40% three ball from beyond the arc, a 42 to 43% three ball on catch and shoot opportunities. You now have to be more cognizant of the fact that although you can guard the paint very efficiently with Evan Mobley and Jared Allen, you now, more than ever with the Orlando Magic, have to be just as wary of what they can do from beyond the arc with two 3 point shooters in Suggs and Desmond Bane on the perimeter. You also have to respect the fact that there are situations where, particularly with Jared Allen, if you force him to come out on the perimeter, a la Paulo Banchero, if you are going to rely solely on Evan Mobley to be your perimeter slider, your perimeter roamer, right? That puts you in position where now Jared Allen is relegated to nothing more than a help defender behind Evan Mobley at the shot blocking spot. Again, that leaves opportunity for potential kick out threes. Jalen Suggs, Desmond Bane, two of the best catch and shoot 3 point shooters with volume that we have in the league. So, although the size of the Cleveland Cavaliers may be a big threat in terms of protecting the paint, it's not necessarily a significant threat in terms of scoring. Notice it didn't mention that in the article that Jared Allen and Evan Mobley were necessarily threats as quote unquote paint presences on the offensive end. This was all about being able to protect the paint. Evan Mobley has become much more dangerous as a scorer. Jared Allen has still been relegated to a lob threat slash dirty work under the basket finisher. On the other end, when you look at what the offense is able to do against those guys, we are able to create 3 point opportunities that the Orlando Magic were not able to create in past situations. So, although defensively, Cleveland has a good formula to deal with some of the slashing and foul drawing and driving that the Orlando Magic have been predicated on for mad years, they don't have a third best defender unless you're calling Lonzo Ball to be that guy, and that's what they acquire him for. They do not have a third guy, a perimeter defender you can ask to sit on Desmond Bane throughout a 48-minute stretch in a 7 game series to hold him down, and that's a tertiary shot creator Orlando did not have. So between having a true third on-ball option and having more 3 point shooting opportunity paired with efficiency, I think that Orlando, yes, does have to deal with the size of the Cleveland Cavaliers, but the Cleveland Cavaliers have to deal with the new wrinkle added to the Orlando Magic this season, being that they should, operative word being should, be a better 3 point shooting team. Again, we'll go through the rest of these teams throughout the coming days as we prepare for NBA training camp. Should be an exciting little mini series. Kind of allows me to share my thoughts on the nuances of the Orlando Magic and what they've built roster wise, while also specifically predicating it against particular opponents that the Orlando Magic are going to see both throughout the regular season and potentially in the playoffs. So this was part one of what should be a 14-part series essentially. We will end every episode moving forward until we've gone through all 14 teams with this kind of a breakdown. Cleveland Cavaliers kicked off things. We will actually probably be spinning the block back and talking about the Knicks a little bit more in the next episode, but I digress. This has been another edition of the Magic Latest Podcast. Again, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit that post notification bell, and I will see you guys again for another episode very soon. Peace.